everyone. I'm your host, Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show. And today I have an incredible guest coming to the platform today. And he is going to be speaking on parenting and establishing a rite of passage for young boys and young men coming out into themselves and figuring out who they are and what it means to be a man. And I couldn't be more enthusiastic to bring this guest to the show. You won't want to miss 1 second of what he's laying down. It's exciting. Here we go. Hey everyone, I'm your host Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show, and today I have Stephen Arms, is the co-author of an incredible book, Milestone to Manhood. Forgive me, a Christian rite of passage to help your 13-year-old son make the leap from boyhood to manhood. When I got a copy of this book, this incredible book, it made me think of Sparta mixed with Christianity, right? That rite of passage that every young man struggles to cross over in, right? And we all have many definitions. We all have many ideas and belief systems. But this is the right way. This is doing it the right way. And he shares his firsthand experience of how his rite of passage weekend went and reflects on how it shaped him into the man that he is today. So help me welcome to the stage the incredible Mr. Stephen Arms.
Marcus, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here on the Gentleman Style Podcast Show, sir. This is epic. Sir, you are phenomenal. I thank you for being here today and giving back in this way. I got to ask a question. First off, how? Why? Who's someone that has been an inspiration in your life, a biggest inspiration? Because this work of art does not fall out of the sky, right? Something caused this. So tell us, what inspired you to write the book?
Well, I've had a lot of positive influences in my life. I would say that one of the biggest was my grandfather. We dedicated the book to him. He was the guy who came up with this whole concept of having a rite of passage for the 13-year-olds in the family. So he started the weekend. He gave it to my oldest brother, who's the oldest grandchild, and then every other grandchild down the line, boys and girls. So I would say that my grandfather had a huge impact on my life. And unfortunately, he passed away in 2016, and coming out with this book has been a way for me to honor his legacy and to continue something that he started many years ago.
I love that. I forgot to mention, y'all, a pure heart of gold. And my condolences and my love and support to your family and your grandfather, who's no longer with us. But again, I know he couldn't be happier, and he's smiling down at his great work. Tell us, help my audience, help us, we understand, what exactly is a rite of passage? What is that exactly?
A rite of passage is an event that a boy can look back on in his life and know that this was the moment that I became a man. When we look at cultures from around the world, we see other examples of coming of age ceremonies, other examples of rites of passage. The most common or most well known is probably the Jewish bar mitzvah. In the Jewish faith, it's the bar mitzvah that helps a boy transition from boyhood to manhood. Once he completes his bar mitzvah, he's officially seen as a man. Another well-known example is the walkabout in Aboriginal Australian society. And in that rite of passage, the boys of the tribe are sent off into the wilderness to survive on their own for 3 to 6 months at a time. And when they come back from that test, they're no longer considered to be a boy, but they're considered to be a man, and they're eligible for marriage. Modern Western society doesn't really have an equivalent coming of age ceremony. And I think that's one reason why we are failing to develop men who are truly virtuously masculine. Simply put, most men today have never been told by another man that you are a man, that manhood has already began. And that's why we see boys extending their adolescence into their 20s and into their 30s because no one has ever told them manhood has already started.
And that's significant, right? And because as you were speaking, I was literally, and even when going through the book, I was wondering when did it happen for me? And I think you touched on it. It's not happening in today's society. We're not having the conversation. I don't think anyone that I know had that. We see it with sweet 16s, quinceañeras with our women, but there's nothing for men, right? And so your family had this long tradition, this long standing tradition when your grandfather initiated. And now I'm sure this is going to be something that is in the arms legacy for many years to come into the foreseeable future. And so that's huge. Why else do you think we're not doing it? Is it too taboo? Is it strange? And why the focus on 13? Right? Because there's 12 years old. You could start this at 11 years old. Why the significance around 13 years old?
Yeah, so 13 years old we feel is the best age for a rite of passage. It's an age where the boy is, he's becoming a teenager, so already it's kind of a milestone birthday in his mind. Um, and there's this tension developing between father and son. The boy is becoming a teenager. He wants to spread his wings a little bit more. He's pushing the limits, but he's not, a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old who, generally speaking, kind of ignore or dismiss anything that mom or dad say by that point. So 13 years old is still just young enough that he might actually listen to the advice being given to him, but he's old enough to understand the significance of the moment. Admittedly, 13 years old is probably it's young. It's a young age to tell a boy that he's a man, but we felt like it's probably better to initiate a boy into manhood a little bit too early rather than a little bit too late, right? By 18 years old, by 21 years old, boys have probably made some pretty significant life decisions without the full support of the other men in their family behind them. So that's why we feel that it's probably better to do it at 13 years old rather than a little bit too late. Now, that being said, if you have a son who's, 15, 16, even 18 years old, you could hold a rite of passage for him. I think that every father has the responsibility to tell his son at some point, son, I want you to know that I no longer see you as a boy, but I see you as a man. And if every father in this country did that, then boys wouldn't feel the need to try to prove their manhood to themselves.
Mm. I love that. I love how you broke that down. And what are some benefits that you've seen personally of your rite of passage? Because I want to jump into your rite of passage story that your dad did for you. But what are some of the benefits that it benefited you today going through that experience with your father?
Yeah, I think looking back at it, probably affected my life in two ways. The first is that when I was a teenager, I was always confident in my masculine identity. And I don't mean to say that I had like huge biceps and a puffed up chest as a teenager. What I mean is that anytime another adult growing up called me a boy, whether it was a teacher or a Boy Scout troop leader, whenever they would say something like boys, please settle down, because the class was being loud, immediately the first thought in my mind was, I'm not a boy, I'm a man. I'm a man because my dad told me at 13 years old. So I never really questioned my status as a man growing up. It was clear to me that my parents, my whole family considered me to be a man after this 13-year-old rite of passage weekend. And then the second way that the weekend really impacted my life was that it gave me a really strong relationships with my grandfather, my dad, and my two uncles who attended this weekend. You know, during the advice, during the sharing exercises that occurred during the weekend, one thing that gets brought up time and time again is the men saying, you are now a part of a tribe of men, and you can come to us at any point in your life to seek advice. You know, we have your best interest at heart. We love you unconditionally. When you come into tough times, when you come into, when you have questions about life, please come to us for advice because we love you. We have your best interest at heart. And, as a 13-year-old, I didn't really know what to do with that. I just shook my head and said, thank you. It really wasn't until I got into my 20s when I went off to college and I met people who had very different beliefs than me, were raised differently than me. And that really made me question all of my beliefs. And so, when I was in college, I started to question my belief in God. And I was really nervous to go back to my dad and my mom and tell them, mom, dad, I'm not sure if I believe in God anymore, because I didn't want to disappoint them. And I wasn't sure how they would react. But in my early 20s, I remembered back to that 13-year-old rite of passage weekend and how all the men had said, please come to us if you have questions. We have your best interest at heart. And that gave me the confidence to go back to my grandfather, to go back to my dad and say, Dad, Grandpa, I'm having some questions here. Can you help me out? And they weren't able to answer every single one of my questions, but they were able to answer some of them. And that was enough for me. Hindsight is 2020. I don't know what would have happened otherwise, but there's a good chance that I would not be a practicing Christian today if it wasn't for this weekend and the relationships that I built with my dad and my grandfather and my uncles during that weekend.
This is major. I see a form of self-identity, right? Having that conversation and marking it with a this is the mark. This 13-year-old, here is the marker where I became a man. And this is the point where you and your dad took off and really put a pin, right? They put a pin on this so you could always reflect on that. In African culture is known as, sitting at the feet of elders. And so they open that door for you. They let you know this is because even at 20 years old, you knew that door was still open. And so that's a very, very powerful thing. Tell us about your rite of passage weekend, please. How was that? How did that go? Were you excited? Were you nervous? How did it go?
It was a mixture of the two. I was both excited and nervous. I'll start by saying that my rite of passage weekend didn't just involve my dad, but it involved my grandfather and my two uncles as well. And I think that's important because, obviously, dad is the most important male role model in a boy's life. He is, the image of what it means to be a man in this boy. But at the same time, at 13 years old, like I was saying earlier, there's this tension developing between father and son. So getting other men involved into this weekend helps to share advice with the boy in a way that he might actually listen. So, another man might say some piece of advice that dad has been saying for the last 6 months, but just hearing it come out of the mouth of another man helps it to finally sink into the boy. Like, oh yeah, I never thought about that before, So it involves the boy's father, but he gets a team of men involved for the weekend. And then the weekend itself is made up of 7 different rituals. And these rituals are kind of meant to be the meat on the bones of the weekend. When we look at other rite of passage ceremonies, whether that's a high school graduation ceremony or a wedding ceremony, there are certain rituals that take place during those ceremonies. There's the walking down the aisle or the procession. In a graduation ceremony, there's a speech by the valedictorian. There's the throwing of caps. And then at the end, there's the conferring of diplomas. And in the same way, when my grandfather and my dad were developing this weekend, they thought, what would be some cool rituals that we could include into this weekend to give it some structure, to give it some meaning. So they came up with 7 different rituals, and those rituals are the entrance ceremony, a discussion of what it means to be a man, a scripture sharing exercise, the gifting of a family heirloom, the gifting of letters written to the boy, uh, the ribbon ceremony, which is going through each man's positive and negative character traits. And then the last ceremony is the formal bestowing of the title of man. And that's really the culmination of the weekend. And then at the end of the weekend, there's kind of an informal ceremony. There's an after party, just like after a Jewish bar mitzvah, there's a party after, or after a wedding ceremony, there's a reception. So after the rite of passage weekend, we all went to have just a regular birthday party for the boy. And that was kind of meant to be a celebration of, he's no longer a boy, but he's a man, and that should be celebrated together at the end of the weekend.
I love that. That's huge. That is extremely huge. This is incredible. I love this topic. We are going to dive right in. We're going to keep going with this. We have a short commercial break. We got to do our own rite of passage. We got to pay some bills, y'all. But don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Good day, podcast listeners. This is your boy, Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show. I wanted to let you guys know that we will be rolling out a new feature and adding a join sponsor button next to the subscriber button here at the bottom of your screen. Once you click the button, it will display 3 membership levels. Gentleman Gentry, which is our entry level, Duke Duchess, which is our season level, and the Emperor and Empress, which is our most sophisticated level, which you will receive unique perks and benefits at each differing level and gain access to our community tab. We will also be sharing polls, upcoming events, and interviews, as well as receive feedback from our sponsors directly. Your support helps me find new and exciting guests to bring to the stage live. Well, in order to get the higher end speakers, it requires, you guessed it, money. So thank you for tuning in to my channel. And if becoming a sponsor sounds good to you, then select the join button below and choose your desired sponsor level. Let's continue to grow and serve the future of generations of men and women to come. Love you guys. Bye.
We are back to the Gentleman Style Podcast Show, and we have the incredible Mr. Stephen Arms spilling the tea on his new book, incredible book, Milestones to Manhood. And he shares his rite of passage ceremony with his family, his father, the men in his family. And it is incredible, and it is absolutely necessary. Because we are not getting that. We are not being fed that pinpoint date of when a boy transitions to a man. And so this is crucial. This is necessary. This is key. And Mr. Arms just shared his rite of passage and the 7 significant events that occurred on a rite of passage. How can other fathers set this up? What are some key things that they should focus on when setting up their rite of passage for their son? What can we do to set that up?
Yeah, I think step 1 is to identify other men who will go on the trip with you. Identify other men who you trust to have a positive influence on your son and who would do something like this with you. We also have a great resource on our website, milestonetomanhood.com. And, we realized, over the 20 years that our family has been doing this, we have a lot of tribal knowledge on how to organize one of these weekends, a lot of emails that went back and forth to the family. And we decided, why don't we clean those emails up and just post them on our website so that other dads can just go to our website, copy these emails, paste them into the body of their own email, send it off to the men. And these emails, they explain what a rite of passage is, why you want to do one for your son, and what the men are going to be doing over the weekend. So we've really given fathers the words that they need to organize one of these weekends. Obviously we can't hit send for you, but we've written the email out already. We don't ask for your email address. I know that a lot of guys don't want to be spammed these days. I totally get it. The emails are free to use. You literally just go to our website, copy them, and paste them into your email box.
I love that. And so what I was hoping, I was waiting for, when I read this book again, I was looking for the Sparta, you had to slay a goat or a moose or elk or something. Can we change or add anything? Where's the best spot to have a rite of passage? Is it in the woods? Is it at your local church or event center, community center? What are some good places to have a rite of passage ceremony?
Yeah, 100%. I think, every father has to make that decision for themselves, for their own son. My rite of passage was held in a cabin about 3 hours from where I grew up. So kind of off in the wilderness. I will say that it's probably best for a rite of passage to occur in a place where the boy has never been to before. So my dad and my grandfather, when they were holding these rite of passages, they always found a new place that was outside of our hometown. They felt that just like Manhood was venturing into new territory for us, well, the weekend should reflect that. And we should go to somewhere new where the boy doesn't have any preconceived notions. He doesn't have any memories of this place. And like I said, he's venturing into new territory by going along on one of these weekends. And, to your comment, Marcus, about slaying a goat or slaying a moose, I mean, fathers can absolutely change this weekend how they see fit. If you want to do something more physical, more challenging with your son, I say go for it. Our weekend is a template, it's an idea, but nothing is written in stone. And I encourage dads to modify the weekend as they see fit to make it meaningful for your family and for your son.
Yeah, meaningful, eventful. I'm thinking war paint, right? I'm thinking the whole thing. This is incredible, sir. There's a epidemic, right? And I can't do an episode with you without asking the hard questions, right? And so most of our young men are being raised by women. Is it still necessary to have a rite of passage? How can a young man whose father is not in the picture, how can he still have a rite of passage ceremony? And how do we work with that?
Yeah, so that situation actually occurred in our family because one of my younger cousins is adopted from my aunt who never got married. So she's a single mother. And, she saw the benefit of her son experiencing one of these rite of passage weekends. So she asked my grandfather to lead up his weekend, and as you can imagine, he totally jumped at the opportunity. So I would say if you're a single mother listening to this and dad is not in the household, you should identify another man to organize one of these weekends for your son. And all of the weight is not going to fall on his shoulders because he's going to identify other men as well, 3 or 4 other guys to go along on the weekend with him. But I do think that it is very important that it is another man that is doing this weekend for him and not a woman, because you can't give what you don't have, right? And boys need to be told by men that they are men in order for them to believe it. And I can say, personally speaking, as a 13-year-old, when I had this weekend, I looked at my dad, my grandfather, and my 2 uncles. All of these men were married, had kids, had jobs, were good men, were much bigger and stronger than me. In my mind, there was no doubt, okay, that's a man. Those 4 guys, they're each men, 100%, no doubt in my mind. And the fact that they turned around and they told me, you are also a man, it was like, well, now I can't question it, right? Because logically speaking, these guys are men and they're telling me I'm a man, therefore I must be a man. I can't question it. So that's why I think that it's so important that other men organize and lead these rite of passage weekends for boys. Now, that's not to say, I don't mean to knock on women or to say anything, poorly about them. No. Our family also held rite of passage weekends for all the girls of the family when they turned 13 as well. And on those weekends, it was the aunts, the grandmothers, the mom that took the girls away for the weekend. So, like I was saying, you can't give what you don't have. And I think it's really important for other men to lead the rite of passage for boys.
That's huge. So what I'm gathering from this is, ladies where the father isn't present, find those men who exemplify the characteristics and the qualities that you want your son to emulate, right? Don't sit there and so when he sees them, he's like, this is the goal. This is where I'm at. And Mr. Arms said it himself. He's like, I gotta buck up because I don't look anywhere near. Like I gotta hit the iron or something. But identify those men in your circle. And if you don't have them, find them. Right? Go out, network, church, ministry, events. Get out there and find those men that exemplify the qualities that you would want to see in your son. Because you're right. You can't give what you don't have. And I'll say it. I'll say it. You've never been a man, right? You can't. It comes better from a man, because you know what it's like. You've never been in that space. And men, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be a woman. There are things I cannot physically relate to, and that's okay. And that is okay. So that is huge. Mr. Arms, where can we get a copy of the book? I got my copy, y'all. Y'all are behind. Where can we get a copy of this great book?
You can pick up a copy of our book on our website, which is milestonetomanhood.com, or you can buy it on Amazon as well. Just type in Milestone to Manhood in the search bar and it should pop right up.
Absolutely. And I'm going to put this website up on the screen so you guys can see it. So absolutely phenomenal, incredible book. He lays down his story, the foundation, but get your copy available on Amazon and place your order today. It is absolutely necessary. This is how we change the future, y'all. This is how we change the trajectory of our young men. This is absolutely epic, Mr. Arms. And I got to say, to our young men in the audience, this episode has been absolutely incredible. You've dropped so many nuggets this show. Any final nuggets or encouragement? Because we're in a recession. We're in a pandemic, right? The world is crazy right now. Stock markets are down. Real estate's up. We don't know what we're doing. Any final words or advice you would give to that young boy watching this episode right now? Anything you want to tell him?
I would say, in the absence of a rite of passage, boys are going to try to prove their manhood to themselves. In the absence of another man telling him, you are a man, the boy is going to try to prove his manhood to himself. And what that might look like is the sexual conquest of women. You hear guys say things like, she made a man out of me, or violence, boys getting in fights with other boys. What they're really trying to do is prove their physical superiority over another man, to prove, right, if I can beat that man up, then I must be a better man than him. Or video game addictions, right? In a lot of video games, you can literally go out and slay a dragon. That totally plays into the male ego of proving yourself as a warrior, proving yourself as a man. And, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of video games, but there is something wrong with being totally addicted to video games and getting your identity from video games. So what we argue is that in the absence of a rite of passage, boys will try to prove their manhood to themselves. And that's why it's so important for fathers to bestow the title of man and to tell them, son, I just want you to know, I no longer see you as a boy, but in my eyes, you are a man. And if every father in this country did that, this world would be a much better place. And it's not only men that benefit, it's women that benefit too, right? It's the women that this boy goes out on dates as he grows up. It's the women who he ultimately marries and has children with. When men are acting like real men, then women win out as well.
Yeah. You create a wholesome man. You create a better man, a better quality of man. You're so right. Mr. Arms, thank you so much for being here. This is epic. Again, thank you for making time for us. Thank you for giving back in this way. Again, y'all, get a copy of this book. You got to check him out. And again, his website, put it back up on the big screen, milestonetomanhood.com, www.milestonetomanhood.com. And if you can't connect with him, connect with me, and I'll get you to him, and I'll get you to that website. Absolutely phenomenal. We got to let our guest go. He has many more engagements. He has many more rite of passages to give. But I thank you all for being here. Like I end every show, thank you for being here. Take care of your families, take care of your homes, and always, always take care of business. This is Marcus Norman, your favorite gentleman, and Mr. Stephen Arms signing off. Love you guys. Bye.